Okay, so we are going to be learning about William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare and the Elizabethan chain of being. So you might be wondering, why do I even have to learn about William Shakespeare? He's such an old writer. I find reading him so difficult, and I promise you, I can help you understand Shakespeare. I can help you enjoy Shakespeare. But what you might not know already is that every single day you probably use words by William Shakespeare. So I'm just going to read you a quick quote by Bernard Levine. Whoops, daisies, that's not the one I'm looking for. Bernard Levine on quoting Shakespeare, because what you might not understand is that this man helped develop our language and turn it into what it is. You see, right now we think of English as a very powerful language, but many, many years ago in Shakespeare's day, it was still a fairly new language. It didn't have that many written documents. And so, two groups of documents were the most important in setting our language in stone. And those two documents have to do with William Shakespeare, the complete works of William Shakespeare, including all of his plays and all of his poetry. And another important document, whether or not, no matter what faith you come from, this document just helped cement the English language, was the King James Version of the Bible. King James is also one of the kings who reigned during William Shakespeare's time. So I'm going to quickly read this to you and see if you can recognize any of the sayings that we use every single day. Okay, on this image, they actually happen to be highlighted, or rather in bold. Okay, so if you cannot understand my argument and declare, "It's Greek to me," you're quoting Shakespeare. If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you're quoting Shakespeare. If you recall your salad days, you're quoting Shakespeare. If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is farther to the thought, if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you've ever refused to budge an inch or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you have played fast and loose, if you've been tongue tied, a tower of strength, hoodwinked, or in a pickle, if you have knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, laughed yourself into stitches, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you've seen better days, if you've lived in a fool's paradise, why, be that as it may, the more fool you, for it is a foregone conclusion that you are, as good luck would have it, quoting Shakespeare. If you think it's early days and clear out bag and baggage, if you think it's high time, and that is the long and short of it, if you believe the game is up and that the truth will out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you lie low till the crack of doom because you suspect foul play, if you have your teeth set on edge at one fell swoop without rhyme or reason, then to give the devil his due, if the truth were known, for surely you have a tongue in your head, you are quoting Shakespeare. Even if you bid me good riddance and send me packing, if you wish I were as dead as a doornail, if you think I am an eyesore, a laughing stock, the devil incarnate, a stony hearted villain, bloody minded, or a blinking idiot, then by Jove, O Lord, tut tut, for goodness sake, what the dickens, but me no buts. It is all one to me, for you are quoting Shakespeare. Now, some of those are outdated, but I'm sure we can agree that you guys probably use half of those at least every single day of your life, thanks to this wonderful man over here, William Shakespeare. And if you get really excited about him, there's so much you can learn, not just about the English language, whether or not you're first language speaker, but also just about the human condition. And you can learn so many exciting ideas. So let's try and learn a little bit more about this man. I just want to say, if your second language happens to be something like Afrikaans or French or German, you might actually have an easier time of learning Shakespeare than an English speaker, believe it or not. Okay, so who was William Shakespeare and who was on the throne? Because this is very important. Who was on the throne when he was alive? That was a lady by the name of Queen Elizabeth. Now, not the current Queen Elizabeth that we have, not Prince Harry's grandmother. We're talking about Queen Elizabeth the First. That is why the thing that we're studying today is called the Elizabethan chain of being. So there we've got Queen Elizabeth the First. And I know that she's Queen Elizabeth the First, not because I just pasted the picture there, but because over here she's got that ruffle around her neck and the red hair. That's how we recognize her, right? Now, who was this lady? Why was she on the throne? And what does all of this stuff have to do with each other? She was the daughter of a king, and his name was Henry VIII. Henry VIII, right? Now, Henry VIII is famous for a number of things. Henry VIII had lots of wives, but because he was Catholic, he couldn't get divorced, right? So he decided, forget you guys. What I'm going to do is I'm somehow going to start my own church. And he started the Protestant church or the Anglican church. And to this day in the world, you actually see tension between these two churches, right? So because of that, his daughter Elizabeth over here was a Protestant, right? At the same time, just for interest's sake, we had another famous queen that was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was Queen Elizabeth's cousin. They were cousins. And I'm sure you think, okay, two pretty ladies, both on the throne. Okay, that's Queen Elizabeth in the movie. Mary, Queen of Scots in the movie. Sorry about that. But you might think, okay, well, they're all lovely ladies. They must get along. But actually, what happened was Queen Elizabeth put Mary, Queen of Scots, into jail, into the Tower of London for 19 years. And they weren't getting along. And one of the reasons is that Queen, the Queen of Scots, Mary, Queen of Scots, was actually Catholic. And I just want to actually get you a better image than that because I wasn't very happy of that with that one. I think I made a mistake in downloading it, but not to worry, we'll get the right picture now. Um, so you had this tension all the time between the Catholic Church, and you also had a tension between the Protestant Church. But more than that, you also had tension between England and Scotland. They were constantly fighting each other. They were just like children who could not get along. Okay, there we go. That's just me uploading a better image of Mary Queen of Scots. So the Scots and the English did not get along, and this is going to come up in some of the Shakespeare plays that you may study. For example, the Scottish play, which is better known as Macbeth. Let me just knock on my table there, because Macbeth is actually seen as quite an unlucky play. It actually isn't. It was the most popular play ever, but because actors couldn't save their theatres, they would perform the play Macbeth, and then they would try to save their theatres, but the theatres would shut down anyway, and so they blamed the play Macbeth. So there's Mary Queen of Scots over there. Let's see if we can just move her away from Shakespeare. Okay, not a very great layout, but there we go. So when all of these people died, so Shakespeare over here was writing during the time of Queen Elizabeth, but after all of these people died, this lady, Mary Queen of Scots, her son was known as King James, and he ascended to the throne, and everybody was incredibly happy. Shakespeare was happy because they all thought, okay, everyone's going to get along. He was a highly intelligent man. There he is, King James. He was a highly religious man. And in his time was the Bible that I spoke about, the King James version of the Bible. And what is revolutionary about this is in their day, Latin was the lingua franca, especially the language of the Bible. And that meant that the Catholic Church had a lot of control over what people learned. And so there was a man by the name of William Tyndale, and he believed that every single English speaker deserved to have a Bible in his own language. You didn't have to be rich, you didn't have to be a noble, you didn't have to be scholarly. Even if you were just a garden boy, he believed that you had to have a Bible in English. And so he organized that. And after a while, under King James, a whole bunch of people got together and wrote the King James Version of the Bible. And that's the only document as important to the English language as William Shakespeare's works. Okay, so are we clear? I hope that makes a lot of sense. William Shakespeare lived during the reign of Queen Elizabeth and King James. If you got nothing else, just get that. And William Shakespeare is highly important to our language. Now, let's see. What can we learn about the chain of being? What's so important about the chain of being? Well, the thing with the chain of being is that the Elizabethans really believed that life had a very important structure. Let's see if I can draw a triangle like this, kind of like a pyramid, right? Life had a very, very important structure, right? And if you messed with that structure, you were messing with the order of the universe. You weren't just insulting God, you were, whoops, daisies, you were insulting the queen, you were going against nature, you basically were creating chaos, okay? So let's see, over here on top, you've got the order of heaven. Whoops, daisies. Let's see if we can get the order of heaven, right? So you had God at the center of that, and you had his um angels and principalities and all the rest of it, right? Then underneath that, whoops, daisies, you had the order of man. And with the order of man, you had the king and all of his subjects, right? So, right below that, coming up third, you have the order of non living things, things like rocks and the earth and things like that. Okay. Um, so, you've got all of those things. Okay, non living things. Fantastic. And then right at the bottom, you had the order of hell, right? With the devils and the demons and all of those things, right? I think most of us are familiar with this little structure over here. We've all understood it. We've all seen this kind of thing, but it actually became a lot more complicated than that in Shakespeare's day. Right, so let's see if we can get more into that. You don't have to know this in great detail, but it is important to understand. So, as I said, at the very top, you had God and he had his order of angels. And this became very, 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 very specific, right? Each angel had their own place on the hierarchy, and there were many different kinds of angels, and the Elizabethans were very familiar with all these different kinds of angels. They may actually come up. So I've got this from Pinterest over here. We can just have a look at that. So you have seraphim. Let's just see if we can make it bigger just so we can look into it. You've got the seraphim. This means that they were the burning ones, right? The attendants at the throne of gods. They were right on top. So they praise God and they sing holy, 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 right? Then you have the cherubim. That was the next sort of angels, right? And their name means the fullness of wisdom, right? Then you've got the throne. So that was the first triad. Can you see over here it says first triad? These were the guys that were on top. So you have the thrones, right? And then in the second triad over here, you've got your dominions, your virtues, and your powers. The last triad over there, you've got your principalities, your archangels, and your angels. So each one of them had their own special and very specific place there on the Elizabethan chain of being. Right. So then, hold on, let's just make that go away, silly image. There we go. I win. All right. So then, after that, you have God who has his parallel on earth. And the parallel on earth is known as the king, of course, right? The king is God's representative on earth. This is very important because if you don't understand this, you won't quite understand why certain things happen, why the weather goes crazy, why there are earthquakes and fires in all of our Shakespeare plays. Now, let's see if I can find you some information on the order of man. Now, at the top, it makes sense that we would have the ruling monarch, right? That will be the king or queen. So let me just write that down for you guys. The ruling monarch, right? So if you don't know what that word means, it just means king or queen. They're on the very top. They are God's representatives on earth. Right after our monarch, in the exact correct order, we've got our nobles, right? And so nobles basically were related to the king. Maybe the king had children with other women outside of his marriage and they didn't want to know that, but he gave them land so they could at least be rich, even if they're not going to be kings or queens. Or maybe they're just cousins and brothers and such things as the king. So your dukes and your earls and the rest of them, right? Now, right under your nobles, you would have your gentry. Your gentry are not quite like your king or your queen. These are people that you normally today see as knights and, so let's see, gentry, knights, dames, those sorts of things. And let me see if I can just move all of these guys up so that I can make more space for the order of man, right? Under your gentry, you have the yeomanry. Can you say that word, yeomanry? It's quite an interesting word. That's the middle class people. Okay, they don't really have fancy titles. They've still got to work for their keep. Okay, so these guys, of course, monarchs, the king and queen, they're in charge. Nobles are things like dukes, earls, thanes. Some of those titles some of you don't, some of them you don't know, but basically they were related to the king or the queen, and with enough deaths, maybe they could become king or queen. That is the theme in one of the plays. The next, you have your gentry, the lords and ladies. When we say ladies and gentlemen, that's a reference to the gentry, that's knights. Then you have the yeomanry, right? And right underneath that, you have your churls, or the word that we know today as peasantry. Okay? That's why they had to work, peasants had to work outside, the poor. Okay? And if they didn't work, they could be put to death. So that wasn't really very cool, right? So, as you can kind of see, the order of man is a reflection of the order of God. Now, like I said earlier, you had God on top, then you had your angels underneath him. After the angels, you had the king. After the king, you had all of these lovely people over there. After that, you had non living things. And at the very bottom, you had the order of hell. Now, we're not going to go into the order of hell in great detail. Basically, the order of hell was kind of like an inside out of the order of heaven. So, hell was made up of fallen angels. So, you could have fallen cherubim, you could have fallen archangels, and all that kind of thing. And they would be at the bottom. Now, what does any of this crazy information have to do with anything? Well, the Elizabethans believed that if you took this and you turned it upside down, all hell would break loose. So, for example, in Macbeth, and I'm going to knock on my table here, in Macbeth, if Macbeth goes and he kills the king, he kills King Duncan, and right after he does that, there are earthquakes, there's fire, and there's wind. In the play Julius Caesar, Caesar gets killed by his friends. And as he gets killed, there are all kinds of earthquakes and winds and things that happen. Right. So according to the Elizabethans, you had to follow the chain of being because you weren't only betraying God, you were betraying nature, you were betraying science. Now, as I said, you don't have to remember all of this in great detail, but if you ingest it, it will really, really help you to understand the beautiful work of William Shakespeare again. And I really look forward to teaching you more about this because it's a deep dive and it's super duper exciting. Okay, thank you.